The very first Apple event for the year has finally been announced. This, of course, is WWDC 2025. It's happening in early June, but this is going to be a very unique and special year for 5 big reasons. Rumors are swirling about new products and updates and major software revamps, and this might also be the year that Apple is forced to make a statement that no one ever thought was possible. A lot of good news and bad news about WWDC for this year, so here are the top 5 things you need to know. All right, so announcement number 1 is likely really to be the star of the show, and it should be most exciting for the Apple lovers and haters out there, and that is iOS 19, because according to multiple sources now, this is set to be the biggest iOS redesign we've seen basically since iOS 7. If you can go back with me into the Apple archives when Apple totally went from lifelike, skeuomorphic, icons so bright and shiny you could lick them, to Johnny Ive's dream of super flat and just a very stark contrast to what Apple had done for the 6 or so generations prior. Now, with iOS 19, it actually seems like Apple is going back a bit to something a little bit more skeuomorphic and lifelike. We're hearing that Apple is set to be taking some pretty big cues from Vision Pro that sort of is mixing the digital world and the real world in its software. And if you sort of look at what Apple has done in certain elements of their own apps, and especially there was like a random iCloud invite app that went live a couple of weeks ago that looks like it has heavy inspiration from Vision OS and maybe gives us our best look yet at iOS 19. So it looks like, according to, to the leaks we've gotten, the concepts you're seeing on screen, it's likely going to be a pretty major overhaul for at least the look of iOS on the surface for this year. Now, there's a lot of debate back and forth from different leakers on how far Apple's going to go with really making this look like Vision OS, and there's a lot of talk about maybe Apple's going to do round icons and things like that. We're not exactly sure how far they're going to go with this redesign, but a redesign, at least as of now, does seem like it's likely to happen. But that also sort of leads us to sort of the good news and bad news about this. The good news is that, finally iOS is actually going to look a little bit different. I mean, Apple has been creeping in the direction of Android for the last couple of years, making iOS more customizable, but this at least is definitely a nice overhaul to the look of the system. But at the same time, we likely won't be getting any major sort of new features or refinements, at least according to everybody who's on the inside right now and who's leaking info. Nothing major is planned. So this redesign, for better or worse, is really going to be the big story for iOS 19 this year. Sticking with the theme, the second big announcement of WWDC is likely to be probably the most controversial of the entire event, and that is all around Apple Intelligence. Now, on one hand, Apple is really, for better or worse, staked their reputation on Apple Intelligence. It was a major part of WWDC last year. They've talked about it basically for a good portion, if not at length, at every single event that is followed. And I'm sure this year Apple's going to talk about all the improvements and the achievements and all of the new features and all the better ways Apple Intelligence will be improved with the forthcoming updates with iOS 19 and macOS updates and things like that. So I'm sure Apple Intelligence is going to get some airtime. What's more interesting, though, is the flip side to that, which is that maybe this could be Apple's perfect opportunity to address some of the missteps and the criticisms. There's a couple of reasons why this might make sense. For starters, since this is like a pre-recorded event, Apple can be very careful with the language they use and how they present things. They can make it a little quick thing, but respectful, so they can really craft it to how they want to. And also, given the amount of backlash and now lawsuits that are popping up, it might not be a horrible idea, like the couple of other times in Apple's past, for the CEO to sort of make a statement, say, hey, we messed up, Apple's not perfect, sort of just reuse the playbook that Steve Jobs used for AntennaGate and sort of address the controversy and then move on, because Apple should make a commitment to be better. Of course, the flip side of this argument is that if Apple doesn't say something, then most people don't know what's going on, so maybe they just sort of brush it under the rug and continue on with how great Apple Intelligence is. Whatever's going to happen, for better or worse, Apple Intelligence will very likely be a big part of the event. 3 is going to be around Vision Pro and Vision OS. Now, Apple's, again, I didn't really intend for this to be a video about good news and bad news, but every one of these things has that with these sort of forthcoming announcements. The good news is that for Vision OS, Apple is going to be giving us, from what we're hearing from Bloomberg, a pretty meaningful update. Apple has taken steps basically over the last year to really try to fix a lot of the issues with Vision OS software and add new features, make the guest experience better. That's great, and Vision OS should be pretty robust in that regard. The problem, though, is that Apple's sort of caught in the middle. On one hand, there is not enough volume of sales and enthusiasm and interest for Apple to really devote probably the resources and the developers necessary to making Vision OS really as big as they'd like to. But on the other hand, there are enough people who have spent thousands and thousands of dollars on this headset, and they've done enough time talking about it that they can't really just abandon it and throw it off to the wayside. So they've got to do something in between. So we're hearing not like a major overhaul, but at least some meaningful improvements should be coming to the Vision Pro headset with Vision OS version 3 announced in a couple of weeks. Announcement number 4 could be all about some new hardware shown off at this event. Now, typically Apple doesn't do hardware at WWDC. It's usually all about software, though there have been some pretty notable exceptions in years past. So this could be an opportunity for Apple to do something, or they might choose not to. A couple of stragglers we haven't seen just yet that should be coming out this year. We've heard rumblings about a new Apple TV box with some silicon improvements. AirTag version 2 was supposed to be at the spring event, which obviously didn't happen. So maybe that pops up at WWDC. There has been increased chatter about a new studio display, maybe a mini LED version, or maybe Apple even does a new Pro Display XDR as well. Not sure if all that hardware, or if any of it, is going to be ready for early June, but there is chatter that it could happen or could not happen. And which sort of leads me to number 5, the 5th announcement we could be getting, and that is a one more thing. Now, you might remember just a couple of years ago, Apple did do a one more thing, and it was one of the biggest they've ever done. It was the Vision Pro that really was the star of the show for WWDC back, I guess it was of 2023. I can't believe it's been a couple of years, but that was the one more thing, which obviously leads to the question this year, could there be a one more thing? And if there is, what could that one more thing be? Well, for years, we've always heard rumblings about Apple projects working sort of under the surface and behind the scenes, things like the Apple Car, Apple mixed reality glasses, foldable iPhones, things like that. And while some of those projects are still in the works, it sounds like from everything we've heard, they're nowhere close to being ready for an announcement. And also some of them that have been like the most expensive and long-lasting projects Apple's been working on, like the car that was supposed to be coming and they'd been working on for a decade, has apparently gotten the axe and has been canceled. So that's not coming anytime soon, if it ever comes ever. So it doesn't seem like a one more thing could be happening. And in terms of any big surprises we could see from Apple, anything, totally out of left field, likely not on the agenda for this year. So that's what we know about WWDC this year. Obviously iOS 19 stuff, maybe some new hardware, and of course some chances for Apple to address the controversy. I'm curious, what are you most looking forward to for this year's event? Are you excited about iOS 19? Do you think Tim Cook should make a statement? Should he not? What would you like to see with Apple software, new features? Drop a comment down below and let me know. As always, I appreciate you guys. Thank you so much for watching. I am Robert Rosenfeld from the Apple Circle. I'll see you all in the next one.